All right, let's widen this out. I know there's people with, I'm hoping, with questions here. You can go to any one of these microphone points. They're numbered 1, 2, and there's number 3. And I think Barney Hawthorne, who's the incoming chair of the IBD section of the BSG, has one to get the ball rolling. But if there are others, please do step forward and we can put them to our panel here. Yeah.
Well, it's a comment and a question. First of all, thank you for an incredibly inspiring session. I think this was really brilliant. We're all here because we're committed to high quality care. IBD teams across the UK want that. And I think it's good just to look back at the history where we've come from. The IBD audit was world-breaking, world-leading in providing quality data, but there's been a proliferation of measurements and targets, and we've had all sorts of things that have been tacked on, which are wonderful. The biologics audit, IBD standards, IBD QIP, and I think that Keith has said that the registry and the data is the focal point that can bring it all together. But the question is, how do we get there? How do we go from 5 centres putting data into the registry into the whole of the UK? And I think the BSG is committed to rolling this out so that we get depth of coverage. And I don't think, as Omar says, we're not going to do this by mandatory filling. We're going to do it by voluntary. And the question is, how do we get teams involved? My personal view is that we have to align this with what people are doing day to day in the clinic. So if we can give them wins in terms of easier data entry, data access that helps them to do their day-to-day tasks, we'll get a win in terms of fantastic data for audit and research. But what do the panel think?
Okay, let's start with you, Ian. I mean, in other words, let's take it as read that people think this is a good idea, can't believe it hasn't happened already, obvious, slam dunk, no-brainer, etc. Now, Barney's question is, how do you get from that agreement to actually doing it?
I think that's a very good question, and I think it comes back to Catherine's issue of equity. I don't worry about the services that the people in this room work in many respects. I worry about the services of the people who are not here. And if you think you've got 200 hospitals in the UK, trusts roughly, you're going to have 50, 70, maybe 100 who have a specific interest in inflammatory bowel disease, but it's the other half. And I think the solution, the electronic solution, has to be available to them in an easy, accessible way that is doable on a day-to-day basis. And I would echo what Keith said about starting small and working up. And I think it's about engaging people, giving them power, giving them the wherewithal and the tools to change their service, and that starts with the data.
But your point about the people in this room, maybe everyone in this room is already sort of preaching to the converted slightly. They've all got it.
Absolutely.
Are there, Stuart, I'm going to put this to you, are there some clinicians, doctors, nurses, whoever, who have not bought into this and would have to somehow change their behaviour in order to embrace this more data-led approach?
Yes, there are lots. And for me, the answer to the question is utility. People will only do it if it's useful. Now, what's useful differs according to the constituency. So Catherine alluded to having a single summary of all of the disease on one computer screen to save the clinician's time, or to allow for telephone clinics rather than actually seeing the patients. That's very important. Patients love the fact that using this system, we can generate a GP letter while they're in the room and give them a copy as they leave. They've never had that before. They have a record of the consultation and the GP gets it straight away. That's pretty useful. Commissioners or managers can instantly know your new to follow-up ratio or whatever other metric they choose. So I think that the key to getting this taken up is to demonstrate that it's useful and that ultimately it saves time and improves performance.
Very good. We've got 2 questions here. Let's hear both of them. We'll bring them back to the panel, then we're going to wind up. Yeah.
The JAG for endoscopy, if you're accredited, gives you extra tariff. Is there any plan to encourage adoption of the service standards by having a JAG-like accreditation system that would then give the managers a financial incentive to implement these quality standards?
You're just pushing at the very limits of my understanding of the subject there.
Yeah.
There were a few acronyms I didn't quite get, but let's take the other question. Somebody on this panel will both understand and answer your question. Yeah.
I've got a couple of points that I'd like to make. I'll try and keep it brief.
Really brief, because we want to wind up. Yeah.
I've been running an alternative web portal for a while now. We have about 800 patients with a group called Patients Knows Best. They have their own personalised websites. And one of the things that we've been asking them is about whether they're happy to sign up. And we've had very few patients worried about data security. One of the things that Richard mentioned is about the transitional group. They really like this form of communication. They don't like the face-to-face. And I believe Rosalind said part of her delay today was because she had to go down for a clinic, which I'm sorry you had to go down for a clinic. We have 450 patients on virtual telephone clinics. And the beauty, the reason I can run that like that is because I use the registry, and if you were to phone me up out of the blue, I would be able to put in your name into the registry. I would instantly get a summary page with all of your details. I wouldn't have to run through your history again. It's on there. And so this is a real benefit for our patients, particularly those calling up in an emergency situation out of the blue. For our own web portal situation, if anyone is doing badly, we get a little alert. When they put their symptoms in, we get an alert in the hospital so that I can actually contact them, phone them, and optimize their management out there in the community.
So the question is why this is an alternative rather than just the mainstream system by the sound of things. Maybe everyone should be doing what you're doing. We're moving to a very, very pithy question if you can, because we need to conclude. Yeah.
The elephant in the room is how do we engage our informatics and IT services to give us this service?
Good, okay. Why don't you deal with the very first question, the JAG-related thing?
Yes, just very quickly, I think the answer here is going to be in looking at accreditation in the round, and that within that look, we try and identify a way in which we can satisfy CQC requirements for an IBD just by having a IBD service that is accredited. So if your service is accredited, you will find through the registry, so you comply with registry, audit, etc., you'll get a tick on the Trust CQC approval. And that would be the way of encouraging people to use the registry.
Yeah, I wondered about money
Always
as well.
challenging, but...
And partly because policymakers, they do, their blood drains from their face when you mention IT systems, because the NHS has a very difficult history with IT systems, which goes to you, Ian, the question there about, elephant in the room is how do you get the IT people to come on board and do this?
Well, I think you've actually got to provide a range of IT options that suits everybody, and for a large number of people that will try to avoid the difficulties of NHS IT departments.
But how do you but you're suggesting bypassing them?
Yeah, by having web-based solutions.
And which are cheaper and more like the alternative system the colleague there was describing.
I mean, I think there's a number of challenges with this insofar as that it's much more difficult to get them to talk to your existing systems, but there's got to be a range of options out there.
But almost, there's this huge bureaucracy. The solution is to get round it and just do your own thing. Absolutely. Lots of nods in the room at that.
And the registry is offering a web tool. As from later on.
It's a slight counsel of despair, though, isn't it? You're sort of saying the actual system can't work, you've got to do it yourself.
And I think that question is actually the real question why the other half don't do it.
Yeah. Super quick from you, Jeremy.
Yeah, just a sort of generic answer to all those questions, really. So how do you ensure good practice gets adopted? That's really what we're talking about. For me, there's three things. One is the proper use of data and registries, etc., has to be seen as a core clinical competence, not an add-on, but core clinical competence. Secondly, you have to make, I echo what you were saying earlier, you have to make it easy to do the right thing. The third thing, which we haven't really discussed, is I think we should be encouraging patients to demand the proper use of data and the proper use of registries. So the more that people like Crohn's and Colitis UK can be putting around the message that this is what good looks like, some people are doing it, but not everybody. Everybody should be doing it, and you should be demanding it, the better.
Well, and both of your groups, and please,
very briefly,
as soon as you can, yeah.
For patients, I know this is all medical speak, but for patients, it's so important that we have something like this, however we're going to get it, because for me, when I was extremely ill, and I had my bowel removed and I had a reversal, and now I have an internal pouch, thanks to some very talented people, but after all that was finished, I felt very alone and very lost. This was prior to Facebook and Crohn's and Colitis coming out on Facebook and everything. And I thought, God, who do I contact? IBD nurses, fantastic. And then, thankfully, to my consultants as well, they gave me their email. So for me, that was a massive communication. I felt I wasn't lost anymore because it's sort of who do you turn to, who do you speak to. So I would be saving them time and effort, and I wouldn't be hassling them all the time if we had something like this. So it's so important we get this off the ground, if possible.
Well, that's the perfect note on which to end this bit of the session and hand over to Stuart, who I'm sure will take that point
Yeah, thank you
on
for
board.
those comments. They're really very valued, really, and very important.